1 is great, 2 is good. Inquisition has its moments. Nikki freaking loves Dragon Age, and she's very upset that I've never really gotten into it. So hopefully with this news, Dreadwolf is going to be on its way quickly, and maybe we can cover it sooner rather than later. But let's check it out and see what's up.
That's most definitely what's up.
That is most definitely what's up. Thank you, Cobes. Let's see.
Salutations, my fellow Grey Wardens. It is Matty here today, and
He changed his intro. I don't like it.
depending on where you stand on how the future of Dragon Age should go, you either had a pretty terrible weekend or a pretty great weekend.
I know nothing about this, so if there was news about this, I don't know any of it, so I feel like I'm out of the loop already, but we're just gonna, I guess, blast into it.
Because we just saw a number of Dragon Age Dreadwolf leaks. Now, keep in mind that a lot of these leaks are gameplay, screenshots from playtesting, aka things I cannot put in the video, so if you are looking for them, you have to look elsewhere. But we are going to talk about that, plus Insider Gaming's report, as well as where I stand on all these leaks. Now, for the too long didn't read, Matty's feeling a little bit worried. I'm a big believer in BioWare. Like, I feel like they got to swing for the fences here with Dreadwolf, but I'm trying not to be too judgmental because what we're seeing is very early. But if what we're reading is an indication of what we're going to get, I do have some mild concerns that I just want to vent to all of you today. So thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate you. Welcome one, welcome all. If you're new here, you're into BioWare content, you're in the right places. I always say there could be something written on a napkin in a diner and your boy will pick it up and make a video about it. So we're always talking about BioWare when we get a chance to. Consider subscribing. Let's begin with Insider Gaming.
He's not wrong. Back in the day, my favorite phase of Matty was his Fallout 4 hype videos. And I've shown you guys some of those old videos that I watched and I was all into back in the day. But Matty would, like, I think he was like late teens at the time, early 20s. And he was just so excited to cover Fallout 4 stuff and speculation because the game hadn't been announced. We didn't know if it existed, but we just wanted it to exist so bad. So he like would make videos where it was like Fallout 4's developers, Bethesda Game Studios, just released 4 t-shirts, 3 of which were Fallout themed. The 4th was just a generic logo. 4. Fallout 3 we already have. So 3 Fallout things is meant to tie it to Fallout 3. And then the 4th one represents Fallout 4. They're telling us things, man. Like, we were straight up like schizophrenic when it came to looking for news and info on Fallout 4. So that was my favorite phase of Matty. It was great. It was great. Those were the greatest days because it was so insane and just stupid. But we had so much fun with it. It was just, you know, childish hype, basically.
Gaming's report, because obviously there is a timeline to all of this, and it started with this Insider Gaming report, which then beckoned the gameplay leak. So let's begin there, where it says Insider Gaming sources who have spoken to Insider Gaming under the request of anonymity have said that Dragon Age Dreadwolf might be further away than previous rumors have suggested. The development of Dreadwolf began in 2015 and has seen significant changes over its 8-year development, but EA is still yet to issue a release date for the title. Previous rumors have suggested the game could release in 2023, but the information provided to Insider Gaming suggests that the date could be rather optimistic. Okay, well, this is pain point number 1. I was really pulling for a little bit of Dragon Age Dreadwolf in the fall. I was hoping that would be the case here because originally what was reported...
No, I mean, it's a ways out. That's what I've heard. John T, thank you for becoming a member. Appreciate you. Thank you. I don't know if you guys caught that, but Matty always pronounces this word this way, and it's so funny to me. And I don't want to bash anybody because, like for one, if you like the word, like ROOF, I know people up north that pronounce it rough. That's objectively wrong. It's not rough, it's roof. Okay, it's 2 O's, makes an ooh sound, it's roof. I hate to be the guy that has to tell you this, but this is what it is, okay? It's a roof. Hate to tell you. Sorry, Brandon. rough. Yeah, sorry, Brandon, you had to find out this way. I'm sorry, but yeah, somebody had to tell you. But like, he just adds a few letters into anonymity, and it's so great. Okay, listen to this. Listen to this.
Where it says, insider gaming sources who have spoken to Insider Gaming under the request of anonymity.
Anonymity? He just adds an extra like I-N. Like, he just adds in a few extra letters in there. I just freaking love it, man. He's done this for like 5-6 years. And I'm sure people have like pointed it out. It's just one of his weird quirks is that he just mispronounces an anonymity. It's like people mispronouncing anemone. Yeah.
Assassin's Creed Valhalla.
Assassin's Creed anonymity.
It says, insider gaming sources who have spoken to Insider Gaming under the request of anonymity.
Anonymity. Oh, Matty, I love you.
Hey, that would be a good place for it to release because it's not ready when people were calling for it in 2022 with some type of reveal. You remember the energy I gave them. BioWare, you need to hit a home run. Do not rush this out the door. But now to know that it won't meet this timeline, I can't help but see that 8-year development stretch and get a smidge of Anthem vibes, right? The timeline certainly speaks for itself. That's where I'm getting all of that from. And at a certain point, again, you can't blame EA for saying, hey, we kind of invested a lot of money into this. We got to see something out of it. So for it to pivot to single player was obviously a great sign of things to come. Clearly that changes where the game is going, what it would become. And that does require a soft reset on development. So it's not like all 8 years they were working on the same exact thing, but it's all been in the same world, the same realm. And to see that we're probably not going to get it this year, again, I will be patient and wait for BioWare to deliver, but it stings a little bit knowing like we're still somewhat of a ways out. Sources who have knowledge of the game and its progress have said that the game still lacks features, completed character lines, and still contains the remnants of the game's past, which abruptly changed directions in early 2021. According to Bloomberg's Jason Schreier, Dragon Age Dreadwolf pivoted from its planned multiplayer components to a single-player experience.
And can we just give, I know this is going to be weird, but let's give EA a little credit. Just a little, okay? Shifting one of their biggest franchises from BioWare, from multiplayer to single player, is like a big move for them. Because BioWare, you'll recall, they had two huge swings and misses. They had Mass Effect Andromeda, which by most accounts was ruined because they were forced to use the Frostbite engine, and it just was a technical disaster. Secondly, they came out with Anthem, same sort of story, forced to use an engine they didn't really want to use. And while it looked visually interesting, it just didn't have a good hook. Like, it just didn't have a good hook to it. And so now you would think, like, in the past, EA, when they've had troubled studios, they gut them or they force them to do a really high risk, high reward multiplayer project, and then hopefully it pays off and they move on from there. But in this case, they're shifting from multiplayer to single player intentionally, which is not something I would have expected. But apparently they're doing it because they see the potential in single player games. They're seeing that single player games can, in a lot of cases, be much more successful than these attempted multiplayer releases. Because, I mean, the thing that a lot of these studios, for whatever reason, don't seem to... It took them a long time to figure it out. It took them like 5-6 years to figure this out. But multiplayer games, they're a dime a dozen. And players are not actually that willing to just hop into a new multiplayer game with all of their friends. It's not actually, like, even if the game is free to play, there's a higher barrier there because players and multiplayer games, people tend to get really into one game that they like and that they really enjoy, and then they stick to it. If I'm really into Overwatch, I'm playing just Overwatch. It's going to take a lot to pull me out of that routine with all of my friends. Same with when I was into like Warzone. I was all into Warzone. It would take me a lot to pull it out. It took them like basically destroying the game consistently every week for 6 months to get me to give up on it. And you know, with Apex Legends, Still love Apex, but they've had massive server issues and stuttering issues with their servers. So I'm just like kind of burnt out on that. But it takes a lot to dislodge players from those multiplayer tranches that they end up in. Whereas single player games, I think players are much more willing to just try it because they don't have to bring their friends over. It can be seen as something supplemental. You know, somebody can still be really into Warzone and enjoying Hogwarts Legacy on the side. Whereas to get somebody really into, that's really into Warzone into your new Battle Royale shooter is going to take a lot more work than just making a good single player game. So I think they're finally realizing this, which is good because they're starting to change how they approach projects and starting to rework them. So multiplayer games are getting downgraded or shifted. Downgraded sounds bad, but it's getting shifted into single player. But apparently that's one of the big problems with this particular game, Dreadwolf, the next Dragon Age game, is that they were making it multiplayer and then at some point they just pulled out of it and shifted. And now it's single player and they're trying to gut the multiplayer stuff and rework things. Exactly, Jern. You're not selling a multiplayer game to one person, you're selling it to a group of people. That's different marketing. Yeah, and you have to convince everybody on that squad to decide to pull out of whatever they're currently playing and give this other game a shot. And then you have to keep them. That's the thing we saw with Halo. A ton of people pulled out of Warzone and Apex or whatever they were playing at the time, jumped into Halo multiplayer, played it for like a week, and then realized there was nothing there to keep them, so they went back. They just went back to what they were already familiar with. So you have to have like this whole ecosystem, long-term support, all of this stuff in order to capture the audience and to keep them. And that's extremely, extremely, extremely difficult to do, which is why so many of these companies that have tried to do it have failed. And I think that's what EA has realized is we keep trying to like go swinging for the fences and have these battle royale games. Like, same with Ubisoft. Somebody in chat said there was news that Ubisoft at one point had, 16 different battle royale games in development at one time. 16 battle royale games at the same time they were working on. Like, talk about throwing like spaghetti at the wall and hoping it sticks. Like, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. And none of them have been successful, right? But they burned millions and millions and millions of dollars on that, trying to make one of those stick. They're like, oh, we'll try one where it's dodgeball. We'll try one where you throw paint balloons at each other. We'll try another where you pat each other on the back. Then we'll contract one that's Sarcastaball. Honestly, I would play a Sarcastaball battle royale. I'm not even joking. And they just tried everything and none of it worked. And so I think these studios are now finally realizing that it's just cheaper to make good single player games than to make 16 multiplayer games, none of which that turn a profit.
Continuing on, they say 2 sources have revealed that some of those multiplayer components are still sensed to some degree in the current build of the game, with one source saying that the game felt a bit like Destiny with a central hub where players could probably regroup before heading into the next mission. The game's hub, though, will still play a vital role in Dreadwolf in its single-player format. Dreadwolf follows a similar gameplay loop to its predecessors, which will involve recruiting and growing your own crew, whom you'll encounter by completing missions. Your recruited crew will populate your hub, where you can then give them different pieces of equipment and modifications as you progress throughout the game. It's understood that you'll be able to move from your hub to missions by passing through a mirrored portal. This would make sense given Dreadwolf continues from where Trespasser is. If you play Trespasser, you may recognize those portals a bit, but this is the part that doesn't sound that bad to me. I know some people saw a Destiny style hub and like shivered a little bit, but to me, outside of probably Dragon Age 2 of all games, there's always been a distinct hub area where the party gathers before you go out on your next mission. In Inquisition, you're in your own fortress. all of your party members are littered about as you go to shops, you do your loyalty missions, you go to the war table, and eventually head out on your next mission. In Dragon Age Origins, it was going to your camp where your party gathered, albeit much smaller. It's where you did your enchantments, and that was really it. Otherwise, you were doing, again, loyalty missions. That's always been a part of Dragon Age to me. The hub area where everyone gathers as you slowly gain a party. I don't think that sounds actually all that bad. Now, when we're supposed to be coming out in 2023, as was reported, and we're lacking features, we're lacking completed character lines, and so on, this brings back a video that Mark Dara, who was with BioWare for about 2 decades, had made about the BioWare hockey stick style development, where they're on this slow, slightly slanted line going somewhat upwards, and then like a hockey stick, you curve up, and things start to come together very quickly at the end. That leaves minimal time for game testing, and that's not necessarily encouraging when BioWare, who I think were once some of the strongest storytellers in our industry, are still implementing character lines. I think by this point in the game, especially if, let's say, you hit the reset button in 2021, you should be further along with the implementation of it. I have no doubt that most of the story, at least it should be written, because it kind of guides where you're going to go and what the artists are going to do with the environments and what gameplay set pieces are going to have to be made by programmers and so on and so forth. So at least I'm going to hope that's the case. But the implementation can sometimes be a slow part of an RPG's process, because if it's like a true BioWare RPG, there's going to be diverging paths and things that pop up if you do specific things at specific times. So there is that potential of why things are taking a while. But if there are placeholders all over the dang game, then that is problematic, and that does show that this game may be like mid 2024. Because the thing that you can rest assured on is that you can still test quests while placeholders exist. So it's not like they necessarily are super behind, but I feel like you want to make sure everything that you're planning to sell is going to be in the game, and then test that a number of times. So, you know, I don't want to, again, read super deep into it, but from my knowledge, I find that probably the most concerning aspect. As for combat, one source who recently played the game...
He's right. Cancel it. Shut it down. I'm done with this. Okay, don't cancel it. But I totally, like... I don't know why. There's just been a lot of games kind of like this. Like, Gotham Knights is probably the easiest one to point to, where it's pretty clear what they were doing. Like, it's pretty clear that that was a multiplayer game that was created to have, like, a lot of monetization in it. And as development went on, they decided to pull out a lot of the monetization because they realized it would be a sort of hot potato that they didn't want to carry. They're like, can you imagine what YouTubers are going to say and streamers are going to say when they see how heavily monetized this is? Let's just cut it. It's not worth it. The lost sales will be way more than any money we'd make in that shop. So let's just dump it. And so they did, but you can still see the remnants. You can see all of the weird, like, crafting component lists where you have like 50 different crafting components that you need at any given time. And I just think that this, hopefully it looks like they pivoted early enough in development that you probably won't feel a lot of that. But little things like, you know, the centralized hub before you go out on missions, a remnant of that where you can see, okay, this was probably originally put together as a multiplayer game. And sure enough, it was. So it's just interesting. Why is everyone so negative about Dreadwolf? I think Bonga, like a lot of this is something I noticed with the Hogwarts skepticism stuff. I agree we shouldn't be cynical or overtly negative, but when people are talking about like Dreadwolf or about Hogwarts Legacy before it came out and you're being skeptical, I don't find that to be negative. Like I view that as just being like fair to evaluating each of the facts and trying to remove any blinders that you might have. So like for this, if we remove that it's BioWare, if we remove that it's EA, if we remove that it's Dragon Age, and we just look at it as a game, then the leaks coming out from people working on the game are concerning. Yeah, it was in active development for a while. Then they had to pivot because they changed entire fundamental directions on the game from multiplayer to single player. So they're reworking everything, and as a result, all this other stuff is happening that's concerning for the developers working on it. So that's a concern. And then you tack onto it, okay, well, this is coming from a studio that's lost a lot of its top talent in the form of BioWare. It's coming from EA, which has a spotty track record. And you just start to see that there's a lot of other pieces to this puzzle that are concerning. Like, is it going to matter whether I'm like hyped for this or not as to whether or not this game turns out well? No, it doesn't matter at all. Like, if I didn't watch this video, if I didn't hear any of this stuff, it wouldn't matter at all when the game actually comes out. The game's still going to get put together. It's still going to turn out probably pretty solid, and that it just is what it is. But part of what we're doing is we're interested in it. We're interested in development. We're interested in hearing what's going on and seeing what's going on. And so it's sort of like its own weird form of entertainment. Going all the way back this, I totally agree, Phil. There's a huge difference between being negative and being skeptical. And I think, for one, a lot of people who are negative say that they're being skeptical as like a get out of jail free card. And they think that that's just, oh, so am I being a negative prick? Or no, I'm just being skeptical. There, I'm done. There you go. Easy. But no, they're very, very different. Like, skepticism is the attempt to be like the ultimate form of intellectual honesty, where you don't assume anything, where you come into it not believing anything. You take as few presuppositions as possible. So you don't presuppose that Bethesda is going to make an amazing game just because they made Fallout 3 or Skyrim. You don't presuppose that. You don't presuppose that, on the flip side, you don't presuppose that BioWare is going to make a pile of garbage because the last 2 games they put out were really, really poorly received. You don't presuppose that stuff. You just try to evaluate each thing individually, and if there's a piece of information that you can tack onto that, then you can take that into account. But you try to get away from dogmatic, broad strokes decrees of what you should or should not think. Is Black Myth still in the Vaporware territory? For me, I don't know. I mean, we haven't seen a lot of it. We've seen some gameplay and some boss fights and stuff, but we haven't seen how it ties together into a single game. So it's going to be really interesting. That's one to definitely wait for the reviews on, because we just don't know. Like, there's not a whole lot to confirm that, okay, this is a well-known studio. We know that this thing's totally real. So I would agree. It's definitely something that you should wait for reviews on. That's literally the exact opposite of your assessment of Starfield. Oh, so I think you're referring to the studio background. Let me, hold on. I think the easiest way, once again, to demonstrate this is with good old MS Paint. MS Paint, I've pulled this up a few times, but it demonstrates the point well enough. As I've said, like, these are our points. This is the point of not buying, this point of hating. Okay, so if you're in this realm, you're like a fanboy. If you're over here, you're a hater. When we start evaluating a game, our goal is to sit right in the middle. Like right here and this is where we start. When I say a presupposition, I mean, we're not starting here, we're starting over here, okay? So if I say I'm going to presuppose that Bethesda is going to make a great game because they made Skyrim, that's what a lot of fanboys do. They're starting, if I avoid my camera, they're starting like over here, not in the middle. But when I'm starting here, trying to remain as in the middle as I can, I will evaluate, yeah, Bethesda has a history of some really good games. They also have a history of some really, really, really problematic releases, namely Fallout 76, which for me was a huge, huge ding. So for me, I go from here and then I pull back here, but this is still a flexible position. I can still move forward from here, or I can move further back. If we find out that, like, let's say we get closer to Starfield's launch and Starfield is like, yeah, so they, like, what's another example of a game that's had a ton of problems? Just let's say it's like a mirror of Cyberpunk. And let's just say that they refuse to send it to reviewers if they ask for like a Series S code or a Series X code. But PC codes are getting sent out, but anything else you can't. And then we find out that they're also not allowing reviewers to use their own gameplay footage. They have to use B-roll to show. This is starting to take us very far back. Even though, like, this was just our predisposition towards like before the game launched, like as it goes along, it gets dinged further and further. And I think the main difference is presuppositions because they're presupposed. It's where you are starting on the spectrum, like fully. So if you presuppose the studio is great and they make great stuff, like Naughty Dog, a lot of people have done this with Naughty Dog, and it's easy to fall into this trap. Naughty Dog, pretty much every time they release a game, it's nominated for Game of the Year. It's really easy to start here, and then you barely have to move. But the reason that it matters whether you presuppose it versus starting at the middle and then evaluating the evidence that points that thing out is that this is still flexible, whereas starting here assumes a lot that can lead you down the route of like ignoring the warning signs, because you can start to explain away a lot of potential hiccups and problems. You can start to explain away, like a lot of people did with Cyberpunk. If we start here, well, they made The Witcher 3. So we're going to start over here. Very, very positive. Maybe for a lot of people, it was probably all the way over here. And I don't blame them, because everything looked great. We're like, yeah, no, it's the guys that made The Witcher. What could possibly go wrong? It's not like they would lie to us. It's not like they would lie and just like straight up hide the condition of the game. So like people would start here, and the thing is, like, a lot of the things that should pull you further to the left probably are not going to pull you far enough to the left to make you critical, because you're starting so far to the right here. And so you'll never reach the point where you start to go, I'm going to wait for reviews, because you started all the way over here. And this is it's a very inflexible position. It's very hard to overcome this and get you all the way over here to the point where you will wait for reviews and not buy it day one, pre-order, whatever. Because even once you're over here, built into this is like, okay, well, they made The Witcher, so they're going to make, if something seems a little off, then, I mean, it's probably not that big of a deal. I mean, they made The Witcher. You can constantly explain things away in that way. I don't know how I pulled up this tool, but I guess that's cool. So what the point of this was, I'm not entirely sure. I'm a little fried mentally. But basically the difference between presupposition and then evaluating evidence that points in favor or against a studio is simply starting point. And if you presuppose that a studio is great, you're going to start so far over here. Very few, or very rarely will there be enough warning signs to get you back across this barrier to the point where you wait for reviews and you aren't inclined to buy it day one and pre-order, blah, blah, blah. In the same way that if you presuppose a studio sucks because they made Anthem last, it's going to take a ton to get you back across the finish line into the territory where you'll be generally positive and might buy it day one. So the goal is to start in the middle, and you can evaluate company history, you can evaluate things like that and consider that, but that's going to move you a little bit left or right. It's not going to start you right on the extremes, which is what a lot of presuppositions do, is they start you on the extremes and lead you to positions that are very, very inflexible. I'm definitely starting near the red for any Ubisoft game. Well, while I will say, like, we try to avoid cynicism, eventually some studios and people and things start to kind of beg for cynicism. Like, dear God Almighty. Like, a great example maybe is, did I already close it? No. A great example is this fantastic thing with The Day Before. If we start at Mark 0, let me be clear, we're all probably floating down here at this point. But that's because each step of the way, they've made things way worse, to the point where now we're like, oh, no, this thing is... This thing is like a total dumpster fire. This is a disaster. And so I don't think anybody's, floating on the right side of this spectrum. But, we got there through the evidence that led us to this point. And if you take it like, I think the difference would be for Ubisoft, evaluating a game like AC Mirage. I really do need to get a tablet. I know I keep saying that. I just have to do it. AC Mirage, this graph is going to be different than the studio. Like, if we go Ubisoft on the bottom, Ubisoft. How did you know? Did Nikki tell you? But if we go here, like Ubisoft on the bottom, this is our graph for the company. I think a lot of people have evaluated the company over the course of its history and have ended up over here. Like right on the border. They might be total haters. They might be very negative, but still generally kind of like, it's probably sucky, but I'll give them a chance. But this is because time and time again, they've made mistakes that have pushed you that way. Whereas for AC Mirage, we'd still like to start here in the middle, but considering Ubisoft's position on this scale of confidence, that's going to pull us over here. But again, it's not going to pull us all the way to our starting point for Ubisoft, because evaluation of Ubisoft as a company is different than evaluation of a potential game or product that they're making, because they could still surprise you. You never know. They've done that before.
Game suggested that it was more akin to a hack and slash compared to the past games, and the game's combat wheel is similar to that of the one in Final Fantasy 15. As for your crew, it was said that you currently cannot control them and only select the ability that they can cast in combat. As for when Dragon Age Dreadwolf will release, it's anyone's guess, but missing voice lines and placeholder text likely suggest it's a bit further back than originally rumored. No actual dates from sources were given to Insider Gaming, but we wouldn't be surprised if the game releases in 2024. A lot more details were provided to Insider Gaming, but we were unable to get sufficient corroboration and will report as more sources come forward, so there's the potential that we do get more out of that. So we're going to talk a lot about the gameplay in this video too, because there was a leak, and the hack and slash aspect does sound accurate. It looks more God of War-esque, but some people were confused on the Final Fantasy 15 comparison, and I think I may be hitting the nail on the head here. Obviously, we'll see when the full game is officially revealed, but I was thinking how in Final Fantasy 15 you only controlled Noctis, but when you wanted to pull in like Gladiolus or Ignis into one of the various moves you could do, you just pressed a button prompt and they would do that right on the spot. But you never really controlled them until obviously they did Episode Ignis, Episode Gladiolus, and the separate DLC. But in the base game, that's how it functioned. And so it created this almost co-op mentality, even though it was a single player game. Another game that did this was Guardians of the Galaxy. You played as only Star-Lord, but you could call in, say, Drax.
Such an underrated game, for real. It's so good.
And he could do, or Rocket Raccoon, they could do their own moves and sort of support you while you were running around doing your own thing as Star-Lord. To me, not in love with this. I love the crunchy tactics of Dragon Age. I think we already saw what happened when we tried to go down the hack and slash route with Dragon Age 2. A game that I do find borderline criminally underrated, at least in the storytelling and world building department, but in the terms of gameplay, Dragon Age 2 kind of satisfied my curiosity of what hack and slash could be like inside this series, and it's not where I wanted to go. Quite frankly, if enemies weren't at times so spongy, I would really say Inquisition was the best of both worlds, right? You got the action elements to kind of run around.
Yeah, it's easy to forget. Inquisition won Game of the Year in 2014. It was the GOATY. It was the GOATY.
Do abilities on the fly, but when it was time to prepare and bring up the overhead camera, you could do just that. Now, old school me is saying we'll just go back to Dragon Age Origins, which pretty much evolved KOTOR's combat, but I understand that's not feasible for a big AAA game because, you know, you want to sell millions of copies. So I understand why they're going to take the action route. I just feel like Inquisition was that hybrid that you could evolve from and say like, hey, you can do tactics and pause the game, and maybe that is a thing, but right now it's reading like it's not, and what we saw certainly doesn't look that way at all. It does not look like Dragon Age Dreadwolf has that level of combat. I saw drop kicks and shield bashes. I'm like, oh man, this looks like God of War. Like, this is kind of crazy. But to me, Final Fantasy 15 is never an encouraging comparison in the realm of combat because it's one button and that's it. But I think the party members are so vital to Dragon Age combat. Like, that's one of its key pillars, its key components, its key strengths. So while I'm not trying to cast judgment upon the game so early, just hearing that alone, that it's even in consideration, to me, that's like a slam dunk. Like, yeah, you can control, say, Morrigan or whoever, or Liliana. It's like, yeah, of course, right? No, the fact that that was a conversation, they said, no, we're not going to do that. Again, I find that worrisome because that to me is a staple. Like, that's something you got to have control of your party members, because that interactivity That's where BioWare games thrive. It's not just out of combat with the conversations, it's in combat, being able to be these characters. Maybe they added in, maybe it's implemented in a different way that we don't know of yet. But just going off what we're reading here, and then what was eventually corroborated by a quick gameplay leak afterwards, I mean, it's just like, man, I can't sit here and be like, oh, I'm confident now. I'm feeling really good about this now. We'll see. Now, then there was the Reddit post that did end up leaking all of these gameplay and...
Do you think we can look at that gameplay? Or will we get canceled? Because I think I saw like a TikTok showing it. I mean, looking at it, it definitely... It's very different. I'll be real. I don't find this to be like a major negative. I don't look at the comment and think it looks bad. Like... You definitely see the God of War inspirations, even just in the UI. The UI is super similar. I don't know. I don't find that super upsetting. I don't know. Maybe you guys have stronger opinions on it, but I don't find it, like, I don't think it looks bad. Like, the sidestepping and the foot movement looks rough, but it is still in development, like pretty early development. If you looked at some of the gameplay stuff from like God of War, before it was ready, God of War, or making, no, it was raising Kratos. And it was specifically like the segment where they were looking at the game a little earlier on.
To make, and you're kind of scratching your head like, how is that humanly possible?
How do you skip it to all those different stages? Are you using bookmarks?
No.
This, yeah.
So yeah, this is actually not correct anymore.
It's unbelievable.
No.
Yeah, like if you looked at this gameplay they're showing here, this is after they had announced the game publicly, they had shown like a gameplay trailer. You would look at this screen video and be like, I don't know, man. Graphically, it doesn't look super great. The UI is super weird. I don't know, man.
Oh, I can't keep up with all this shit.
Oh, this.
You better work, Kratos.
Like this.
Lamb's crest.
Lamb's crest.
I'm a fucking God of War.
That's amazing. I hope you guys...
Yeah, I wish they kept that. But like, if you looked at this stuff, these are playtests. So if you're ever wondering what it looks like when these studios are playtesting games and seeing if gameplay systems work well, this is what it looks like. Like they have players sitting in little cubicles, and then they test them and try to see what they like, what they don't. It's pretty cool.
He took my thing.